I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Greetings, Internet, and welcome once again to the psychedelic tour into the inner mind that is the Bangers and Mash show. As always, once again, your host, Mr. Bangers, that's me, and my buddy over here is...
Mr. Mash!
Today's theme is a theme we have been promising since at least last summer, and we are finally getting around to doing an episode because, as with everything on this show, we go at our own glacial pace. And this week's theme is a theme that will probably alienate a large portion of our quote-unquote viewing audience. We are talking today about horror musicals. Now, I've got a question for you, JD, Mr. Mash.
I might have an answer.
Why does horror and musical films go together so well? Because there have been a surprising number of films in this genre.
You gotta make a score for a horror movie anyway, so why not have the actors sing and act it out?
See, the problem with that is all movies have scores, and the musical genre does not go well with other genres. I've never seen a musical swashbuckling porno.
Have I seen that?
Have I seen a musical swashbuckling porno? I don't know. Though if it was a porno, the swashbuckling would never mind. The swashbuckling sounds dirty, doesn't it?
Yes.
You know, buckle your swash, baby.
Anyhow, let's time warp on back to what we were talking about here.
The reason I think horror and musicals go together so well is in the horror genre, you're already asking the audience to believe things that are technically impossible in everyday life. Usually. You're asking the audience to believe in vampires or zombies or space aliens, something that is scientifically impossible. And with the musical genre, you're asking the audience to accept a pretty big implausibility in that characters burst into song and dance at random intervals to express their inner feelings, which, as far as I can tell, most people do not do in actual real life. Most people. So I feel like that's why horror and musicals go together pretty well. Also, you know, horror explores some rich emotional veins. Fear, trauma, coming together in times of tragedy. It's strong material for music.
It was a pretty long-winded assumption, but I would concur.
I've been accused of being long-winded from time to time. If you're going to talk about horror musicals, there's really one movie you have to talk about first. In defense of musical theater, the musical genre is one that is looked down on by a certain portion of the population. You would say, right, JD?
Yes.
It's not for everybody. This is true. Much like horror is not for everybody. There are a lot of people who turn their nose up at the horror genre, but fuck those people.
Right. Fuck them.
We all have our personal taste, but we, for one, happen to enjoy at least some musical films.
Some are actually legitimately good films.
JD is a huge Grease fan.
I'm not a huge Grease fan.
In high school, you talked about that movie like every other day. You were always trying to get me to sing the "We Go Together"
because
like
it's funny.
Zip zap zoop zap.
Because it's funny to try to get you to sing it. I also got you to sing Rocky Horror on numerous bases.
Yes, at one point, were we going to or coming home from
Both.
Driver's Ed? Okay. You asked me, in jest, sing Rocky Horror Picture Show in its entirety, and I did it. And amazingly, nobody immediately started throwing things at me.
And screaming, "Fuck!"
Yeah, exactly. Weird, because that usually happened in high school. Amazingly, I somehow flew underneath the radar in that instance. About halfway through the third song, you're kind of like, oh god, I opened a can of worms. So naturally, when you talk about horror musicals, the first thing that comes to mind is usually the Rocky Horror Picture Show, even though it's not actually a horror movie.
No, it's not. It has some stuff in it.
It
but
takes the aesthetic of the horror movie to use it for its own twisted, warped purposes. But it really is movie pop art, because it's a fusing together of various contrasting aesthetics. It takes a lot from Hammer horror. Visually, it's quite reminiscent of Hammer horror. It has a lot of glam rock. It takes a lot from cheesy 50s sci-fi, and then you have gee whiz, aw shucks, 50s couple in the middle of the movie. Sort of similar to what Tarantino Tarantino does in all of his films, where he takes various contrasting, unrelated things and sticks it all together into a malleable whole. So is this movie any good, JD?
I like it.
You say that with some reservation.
It's a really gay movie.
Yeah, how gay is this movie?
Really gay.
We're comfortable in our sexuality, right?
Right, I mean, I enjoy the movie, and I will admit that. It does have some parts that make me feel maybe straight guys shouldn't be as comfortable with this movie as I am. I can't help it. It's a good movie.
How would you explain Rocky Horror Picture Show to somebody who has never seen it or even heard or knows anything about it? How would you explain it to a complete virgin?
Frankenstein, but with gay people and rock and roll. Dr. Frankenfurter is literally a Frankenstein spoof.
He's making a creature. He's not making a lumbering monstrosity. He's making himself the perfect man that he can do things with. I honestly feel like this is almost picking up on the gay subtext that's frequently read into the Frankenstein story. Maybe? A guy making another guy. I guess it's not too far of a dot to connect. That's sort of its basic premise. What it's about, this young engaged couple that stepped right out of Ward Cleaverville, stumble into the middle of 70s decadence, rock music, sex. There's no drugs, but not in the movie anyway. I'm sure the people making it were on them, though. Frankenstein, space aliens. A recurring theme I noticed in a lot of these horror musicals is they have a Greek chorus type character. A character that speaks directly to the audience about the situation they're in. And of course, Rocky Horror has the criminologist who stops the film periodically and explains things to you.
Like, it's just a step to the left.
In dramatic, very dry ways. From a narrative perspective, what's his purpose? You don't really need this character to set up the story for you. It's pretty self-evident in the film itself.
Well,
So,
I think it's just
why is he there?
Just an added comedy.
I always wonder, are they trying to invoke like 1950s horror comics where there was a narrator talking directly to the audience?
I don't think it was that.
The criminologist as a character, he's very dry and serious, which is in contrast to the rest of the film.
As the film progresses, he gets weirder and weirder. Starts off with, he's very serious, and then you get to the time warp scene.
He's singing and dancing.
And he's like singing and dancing.
Actually, I feel like it's the other way. That is the only moment where he comes alive as a character. The rest of the time, he is just serious British man, and then he just gets up, because that's how infectious the time warp is. Everybody has to dance to it, and I'm sure we will dance it before this evening is over. What's Brad and Janet's deal? What the hell's wrong with these kids? Is this movie set in the 1950s?
I think there's a very clear message with the film, like that ignorance is bliss.
Really? The theme of the film is something I've always wondered about. At first, it looks like Brad and Janet are two squares, and they're going to run into this crazy party that's going to make them groovy and cool. But the film actually goes in kind of a different direction. Its tone switches somewhere near the end from, hey, sexual freedom is good, loosen up a little bit, but then it becomes like, no, don't loosen up too much, or else it will destroy you. Or you're suggesting this is an Adam and Eve story. This is a fall
not so
from
much
grace.
not so much like an Adam and Eve story, but I think that it is set in the 50s when the rock and roll era was starting to be more prominent. I think it speaks out about the corruption of rock and roll.
This is a societal thing. This is about the change of the social dynamic in the
Because, I mean,
1960s.
if you look at Brad and Janet are very square, and then they get in with this crowd,
This wild and crazy bunch of people.
and then by the end of the movie, they're completely changed as people.
They're totally
They're
burnt
total
out.
sexual deviants.
Okay, wait. So you're saying this entire movie starts in the 1950s, goes into the 60s, and ends in the early 70s? When everybody was burnt out of their brains and on drugs?
I feel like it's trying to speak about how people viewed the corruption of rock and roll.
Is the movie ironically enforcing this concept of if you listen to rock and roll and have a lot of sex, bad things are going to happen to you?
I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
That scene at the end where Janet and Brad and Dr. Scott are on the ground in the fog, all burnt out. Their desperation is sincere. The movie isn't being ironic in that regard. We're supposed to feel bad for them because their lives have been destroyed by these crazy out-of-town sex aliens.
They go from clean-cut kids to stoned out of their mind. Because that's what the Medusa thing is. They get stoned.
Yeah, I never picked up on that before, but you're right.
And then after they get stoned, do the performance at the end.
I can't believe I didn't pick up on that before. The corruption starts before them, though, because by that point in the movie, Dr. Frankenfurter has already seduced both of them, and Janet has had sex with Rocky. And that brings us to, he's not the main character in the film, but he's the most famous character in the film. And of course, that's Tim Curry's Dr. Frankenfurter. First off, what does the N stand for? Does it stand for nipples?
Maybe.
It doesn't show up until about a half an hour into the movie.
Yeah.
It's about Brad and Janet's strange journey into the world of sexual grays. The thing about Frankenfurter, is he the hero or the villain of the film? Because the movie seems to kind of want to have it both ways.
I think ultimately he is kind of like an anti-hero.
He's not a good person. He murders people in cold blood. He has incredibly shallow motivations for murdering people. He kills Meatloaf because he looked at his boyfriend. That's it. That's the whole reason he kills Eddie's, because he glanced at Rocky. One look and suddenly pickaxe murder. That's all it takes to push Frank over the edge, apparently. He manipulates everybody around him. There's that big song number at the end, I'm Going Home, which is sort of hard to read, in my opinion. This is why I say the movie wants it both ways. Frank is clearly the villain of the film because he does bad things to everybody. The movie wants the audience to feel for him, and I've never been able to figure out if the I'm Going Home number at the end is meant to be taken straight by the audience or not.
Would you say instead of him being like an anti-hero, he would be more like a sympathetic villain?
The movie wants him to be a sympathetic villain, and it doesn't necessarily do a convincing job of it. I sometimes wonder if the fan base hasn't missed the point. Obviously, Frankenfurter is the most admired character by the hardcore Rocky fans, would you say?
I would say so, yeah.
And yet, he's egotistical, self-centered bastard.
But could it be that his loneliness has ultimately driven him to this point? Because he clearly is a lonely person. Think about it this way. He creates a lover, basically. That is what Rocky was made for, to be a lover. He doesn't like the idea of Janet and Brad leaving him, so he ultimately seduces them. He's afraid of them leaving him, so he seduces them and gets them in that world.
To do a deep psychological reading into the Frankenfurter character, another thing is that he doesn't have any stable, strong connections with anybody.
Exactly.
Is he just being a shallow person because he's afraid of getting hurt?
That's probably what it is.
The thing is,
I'm saying that's how he could be a sympathetic villain, is deep down, he just wants friends.
I think the thing with the character is he thinks he's sympathetic. He thinks he's the victim in all of this, which is honestly a pretty honest portrayal of a narcissistic personality disorder type. It's
all about narcissism, what is that?
I've always disliked the I'm Going Home number. This person, in the whole movie, doing bad things to people, manipulating people, says, no, you don't understand. It's not my fault. I'm a victim. And maybe that is intentional, because immediately after that, the character, of course, gets killed.
I agree with you. I don't like that number. I feel like it really changes the tone of the film.
It's a pretty song. It's well sung. It's always stuck out to me. When Richard O'Brien created the Rocky Horror Show, the theater show, he was in his own period of weird sexual uncertainty, and I feel like that confused emotion comes out through the final product, which is maybe why the message is all over the place, and it's kind of a bipolar story, and it can't seem to decide if sexual freedom is good or if it's bad. Maybe it's saying too much is bad, but a little is good. Maybe that's because that's where he was emotionally, or maybe he was just doing too much pot at the time. Who knows? Maybe they're aliens because they're so far off from the heterosexual norm of the day. Maybe?
Maybe they're aliens because they're far out.
This movie made a couple of people legitimate stars. At least two.
Tim Curry.
Tim Curry, this is his big coming out film. What are your thoughts on his performance?
I couldn't picture anybody else in the role.
Nor would you want to. If he was in a room with a group of people, everybody would be looking at him, not just because he's dressed up in corsets and fishnets, but because he draws that attention.
Richard O'Brien, this was pretty much all his idea.
It was, yes. He conceived the project. It's his story, his idea. Interesting that he cast himself as the Igor character.
Again, I couldn't picture anybody else in the role.
But come inside. Riff Raff is an interesting character. I always loved his freak out at the end. They didn't like me! Nobody likes me! I've always enjoyed that. You could say this movie is pretty shallow. I don't think it is. I feel like there are some deep veins that the film potentially gets at. And if you want to talk about characters that are alienated and unhappy with their role in life, I feel like Riff Raff is probably one of the most unhappy characters in this film. Is he in love with Frank? Is everybody in this movie in love with Frank?
I think that maybe he had a secret crush.
Maybe Frank is... There are people like this who exist in real life who just kind of sleep with everybody. Do it in a way that somehow gives the person they've slept with the suggestion that it's love. But maybe that's why. Maybe that's what's going on here. And I also feel maybe Riff Raff was Frankenfurter's squeeze until Rocky came along, so there's a jealousy thing. Because there's a lot of jealousy directed at that character from him. You know, he throws the candles at him and sicks the dogs on him.
I think they just did that to spoof Frankenstein.
Well, that's probably part of it as well. And
maybe that was Riff Raff's sick, twisted way of flirting with Rocky.
Well, this is a dude who fucks his sister.
Well, they're not actually siblings.
Are they? I don't know. The film doesn't really make it...
When they reveal themselves as aliens, they're not actually
Are you
siblings.
sure? I was under the impression they were actually brother and sister.
And how does her hair get so short?
Barry Boswick and Susan Sarandon.
I really like Susan Sarandon.
Well, she's nice to look at. Janet is not really prepared to handle her sexual awakening in this film, I think is the nice way to put it. The not so nice way to put it is that she sleeps with everybody. They do a good job of playing the perfect squares. Barry Boswick especially. He's kind of actually awesome. He's sort of the dark horse in this film in that nobody really talks about him, but he's really funny. He's hilarious in this movie. He's so good. Things he says are so perfectly deadpan.
I wonder how many times he lost his voice talking like this.
It's his deadpan delivery that makes it funny. When he says things like, maybe they'll do some more folk dancing. I feel like he's actually sort of the secret best performer in this film because he manages to keep a straight face. Charles Gray. I hear he's okay.
But he's got no fucking neck.
Meatloaf is in the movie for a short period of time. He sings one song and then leaves the film. He makes an impression, especially since he sings all those words very quickly.
He sings one of the most catchy songs in that movie.
What's up with the dude playing Rocky? He doesn't seem cognizant of what's happening.
I think he was just stoned out of his fucking mind. He's like, dude, I'm walking around in a gold Speedo.
Some drugs might have been necessitated to give him...
I feel like the sword of Damocles was hanging over his head, so he was just trying...
That actor, Peter Henwood, has done nothing since this movie. He has sort of disappeared.
But wasn't he just like a bodybuilder at the time anyway?
Probably, yeah. Dr. Scott is supposed to be a Nazi.
I'm so glad you pointed that out to me, because it wasn't obvious.
Overall, the film's cast is actually one of its best attributes, and maybe what keeps the whole thing together when the script goes off the rails and bounces all around all wacky and crazy.
Got a great ensemble cast.
Also, Little Nell, who plays Columbia. Highest pitched voice ever? JD
I don't know, what about that?
Who is a higher pitched voice? Little Nell or Sherry Moon Zombie?
Oh, Little Nell, I guess.
Yeah, science fiction double feature. I love that song because it has all these little references to old horror and sci-fi movies.
It's the most recognizable song for me.
Damn it, Janet establishes Brad and Janet as characters. It's probably another one of the more famous songs from this movie. It's pretty well known. It's very catchy. Over the Frankenstein Place I've always loved because it's actually one of the slower, moodier
yeah, but this
songs
was like
in the film.
eerie. I like that it tries to have a horror tone to it.
The lyrics are actually pretty upbeat. Time Warp is probably this movie's major contribution to overall pop culture, I would say.
Even people that haven't seen this movie know what Time Warp is.
Yeah, it's of that level of pop culture absorbing. People are pretty aware of the Time Warp. Talking earlier, The Hustle and the Macarena, and most recently Gangnam Style, stupid songs that have a dumb dance that go with them, immediately become pop culture phenomenons. I've always liked sort of Damocles, Rocky's only major song in the whole movie. And the lyrics really don't have anything to do with the movie. Rocky acknowledging the fact that his life is pretty much screwed from the beginning, because the dude lived for maybe like 6 hours. That's his entire life before he gets killed. Does Susan Sarandon have a good singing voice or not?
I think it got auto-tuned a good bit.
Auto-tune wasn't a thing back in 1975.
Well, they had to have something to touch it.
There was definitely some studio post-work there, but yeah, it's a little too airy for my taste. Dr. Scott doesn't really contribute anything to the story. He's just kind of there.
They need to have a guy in a wheelchair.
Yeah, they need to get a mad scientist with a funny accent into the movie. Before we close the book on Rocky Horror, we're going to talk...
And in all honesty, it's perfectly fine. All that happens is you go in there, you get a red V written upon your forehead, you go up there, they smack your ass.
Or they do some humiliating game. There's some sort of ridiculous thing
or
happening.
Make a sex noise.
They make you deep throat a banana, something like that. Well, let's talk a little bit about our first Rocky Horror experience.
Okay.
3 years ago now, standing out in the middle of the night in very cold October weather. It's not particularly warm in this part of our country during October. They ask you if it's your first time, and if you answer honestly and say yes, they mark you on the forehead with a V before the show. They usually make you go up there and do some games, line everybody up and pick out some of the hotter ones and make them do something humiliating. One of the things that I love about the Rocky Horror experience is you just get a real contact high because everybody is so energetic and excited to be there, and there's so much jumping around and singing. It's a lot of fun.
It is.
And you get to throw things. It's good stuff.
But you're tired as hell when you go home.
You come down hard.
Where we live, there's not a whole lot to do.
No.
So...
It's pretty unexciting in our part of the world. It's become an October tradition for us, as I imagine it is for a lot of people. For some people, it's a weekly tradition. Those people are crazy. People who live Rocky Horror 24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are some hardcore fans. A little too hardcore for my taste. Overall opinion on Rocky Horror as a movie, it's good. It's not great from a writing perspective, from a structural perspective, but the cast is strong enough and the music is strong enough. Generally kind of infectious. It is one of those movies you can watch a lot. When you talk about Rocky Horror, you kind of are obligated to acknowledge it's 1981. The fans like to say it's not a sequel, not a prequel, but an equal. It's not. I'm talking about Shock Treatment. Now, this is an odd film.
It's more than odd. They took what people liked most about the Rocky Horror Picture Show and got rid of it.
They were trying to replicate a cult phenomenon, and you can't really do that. Cult phenomenons are something that evolve naturally. A movie goes out there, and nobody sees it at first, but eventually people find the film on their own and become passionate about it. And Shock Treatment was trying to intentionally evoke that, and it didn't really work. It's not a completely useless film. There's some interesting things in it. It's not really a sequel to Rocky Horror. The only connection, Brad and Janet are in it. They're played by completely different actors, but they're in it. That's pretty much it. There's a lot of the same cast and crew involved. The story threads aren't really connected. One of the big things it does, at the beginning of Rocky Horror, Brad and Janet come from this little town called Denton. Shock Treatment makes Denton a television studio where people sit around and watch live recordings of TV shows all day. And they were attempting to satirize television, and a lot of people say this film kind of predicted reality TV, maybe, since you have real people being forced into situations. The satire is not really clear, though. I'm not exactly sure what the point of all of it is. They're trying to make some sort of wacky statement, but it doesn't really read well. One of the things wrong with Shock Troopment is that it's trying to do a lot of stuff. You have this whole storyline about Brad and Janet's relationship troubles, the whole thing about the town being inside of a television studio, there's mind control, mind manipulation, and Brad has an evil twin brother.
You remember way more about this movie than I do.
Probably seen it more. One of those films I keep giving a shot to, even though I never really like it. I watched it a lot thinking I might like it this time. It's definitely not as funny. It's just badly paced. The story is just as scattered, and it doesn't have as strong of characters. That's a really nice... What's with Richard O'Brien and incestual siblings? Because him and Patricia O'Neill play brother and sister who are into each other in this movie, too.
Maybe him and Patricia O'Neill are real-life lovers.
I don't know. But I wonder if he was putting that in there to intentionally emulate Rocky Horror, or if he's into that kind of thing.
Maybe he's into it.
I do like Jessica Harper as Janet. Like Jessica Harper in general. Cliff DeYoung is kind of interesting as Brad, because he does convincingly play two different characters. He's Brad, then he's Farley, the evil twin brother, who is kind of a Jack Nicholson clone. Almost all the important characters from Rocky Horror come back, except for Tim Curry and Richard O'Brien and Little Nell and the Charles Gray. They're all there. I actually do like the songs from Shock Treatment. I think one of the reasons it alienates fans of Rocky Horror is that Shock Treatment has more of a new wave 80s punk sound to it, why Rocky Horror is kind of a classic rock, glam rock sound to it. I do like a lot of the songs. I like Denton USA, the opening number, Bitchin' in the Kitchen, Lullaby is pretty. I like the title song. I like the dual duet at the end because it has the line, "You're uglier than a Mississippi alligator's sister's kisser."
Okay, that was fun.
And there are definitely a large portion of the songs that aren't particularly memorable, though. Shock Treatment is not entirely unfairly maligned. It's not a great movie. It has some things that are worth keeping. Mostly, I like the soundtrack. Can't really get into it. Like I said, I keep giving it a shot. It's one of those movies I keep rewatching in hopes that I will like it the more I see it.
It sucks, guys. Just don't even watch it.
It has a following. It actually does have a following. In fact, it has a fan following that is almost as strong as Rocky. Smaller, but they're just as passionate. The cheerleaders are hot. This next film is a personal favorite of mine. I actually love this movie, and I showed it to JD in hopes that he would love it too, and he didn't.
I despise it.
He was openly antagonistic towards it. We're talking about 1974's Phantom of the Paradise. This predates Rocky Horror, and it's often compared. They have a very similar aesthetic. They're both very 70s. In its most basic form, it's a rock and roll version of Phantom of the Opera. A deformed person in a mask haunting, instead of an opera house, it's a rock and roll theater. But it's more complicated than that. Now, there are elements of the Faust story. The rock opera being performed is the Faust story, and that gets involved in the story. Somebody sells their soul to the devil. There's elements of Dorian Gray. There's, instead of a painting that ages in place of the person, it's film. And he filmed the pictures of this person. There's even a little bit of Frankenstein in there in one of the performances. So this just takes a lot of classic horror elements and puts it into this crazy glam rock setting. And it's actually a big satire of the music industry. It basically says, if you want to become a big pop star, you have to sell your soul, in none too subtle terms. More than that, it sort of criticizes the fan idol culture. In this movie, the fandom is willing to eat up anything the rock factory shovels to them and immediately adore it. Rock stars literally dying on stage, and the audience forgets about them the next minute and starts cheering for the next person that comes on. This is a Brian De Palma film, so you have a lot of the Brian De Palma trademarks. There's a split screen sequence. There are at least two obvious Hitchcock homages. There's a parody of the scene from Psycho, somebody getting attacked in the shower. You have long takes that go on, and there's a lot of voyeurism in this movie. In fact, there's one scene where a character is spying on two people, and that character, unbeknownst to him, is being recorded by the first party. So it's actually a double voyeur scene. Villain of the film, Swan, records everything, which is tying into this whole narcissism system. People who have to document every aspect of their daily lives, which is way more of a problem now than it was back in 1974, with the Twitters and the Facebooks and etc. It's sort of hard for me to explain why I love this movie so much, because there's just so many things in it that appeal to me. Classic horror aspect, the unrequited love storyline, I like a lot. Tragic ending. It's a lot more of a serious movie than Rocky Horror. It has some of the same campy aesthetics to it. Its themes are a lot sadder and deeper, and its ending is pretty downbeat. I love the cast. Paul Williams, who is this weird little short dude with a fat face and this tiny little voice, who is cast as kind of an oddball Faustian devil figure. William Finley, who just passed away recently, which makes me sad, is great as the Phantom. Jessica Harper, again. This movie is probably what got her the part in Shock Treatment. She has a wonderful voice. I like her a lot. Garrett Graham plays Beef, sort of David Bowie, Ziggy Stardust, outrageous glam, omnisexual person, lots of drugs. Unlike Rocky Horror, there's a lot of drugs in this movie. In fact, one of the funniest scenes involves a character with a handful of cocaine, and they take a little bit more, and then finally they shove their face in it, and that's when they look over and realize they're on camera. And there's just some hilarious lines of dialogue, especially from Garrett Graham. He's very funny. I know drug real from real.
The reason that I hate this movie
It's a stupid reason. It's a stupid, shallow, unimportant reason. It's as bad as hating The Dark Knight because you don't like the Batsuit.
It's barely a musical.
It's not a traditional musical.
It's not even a musical. It's not.
You want to fight about this?
I do want to fight about this. It's not a musical.
How is it not a musical, JD?
Because for starters, it's got way too much story. It's not, they just break out in the song, and they're on stage practicing this song, or they're not showing their emotions by singing.
Oh, sure they are.
No, they're not.
They're not spontaneously breaking out in a song and dance. It's a musical because it's about the music industry. Yes?
No, because then The Doors would be a musical.
The IMDb considers The Doors a musical. He's glaring at me right now.
The IMDb is stupid. The Doors is not a musical, it's a drama.
I understand what you're saying. I think it's a dumb reason to dislike the movie.
There's other reasons.
Why do you hate Phantom of the Paradise so much, JD?
It is basically an unoriginal idea. I just don't like it.
Oh, because Rocky Horror is so original, even though it cribs everything from everything. Oh, and those Tarantino movies you love so much don't steal anything from old, obscure movies nobody's seen or heard of.
Okay. Listen here. I mean, this is a piss-poor remake of Phantom of the Opera, and you can argue that it isn't all you want to, but you know damn well he gets ink acid or whatever the hell it is, ink thinner thrown in his face.
That's not actually what happens. He gets his face.
He gets his face crushed.
His face is burnt in a record press.
Yeah, they didn't have record presses back in the days that the Phantom of the Opera took place. It's a clear ripoff of the Claude Rains.
It's not a ripoff. You can't rip off a story that's in the public domain. It's modern.
If you were going to let me finish, I would.
No, I'm not going to let you finish.
I was going to say it's a pretty clear ripoff of the Claude Rains Phantom of the Opera.
No, it's not.
Just seen that movie recently. Thank you very much.
That's just the Phantom of the Opera story, though.
More importantly,
one of the things I like
the lead sucks.
One of the things I like about the movie is that it repurposes classic horror archetypes in a modern setting. I love things that do that.
The best thing that fucking William Finley did was die. There, I said it.
I'm cutting that out. That's mean. He's great. He's a real-life Nebbish.
Paul Williams, who is one of the main characters, if not the main character.
Well, he's the villain of the film.
You hate to even hate the guy because he's so fucking short and ugly and pitiful looking that you can't even actually hate him because you're too busy laughing at his actual physical appearance. Like, that's how the guy looks. And then when they had devil horns on him, you're like, oh, well, now it makes sense. Now he's just a demonic troll from some alternate hell dimension. And Jessica Harper, I could dislike her.
How can you? She has those big doe eyes, and she's the perfect sort of wide-eyed.
But she's emotionless. I don't like her.
She's not emotionless at all.
You're just saying that because you're trying to defend the movie.
I like the movie.
The whole damn time she had like this blank fucking stare on her face the whole entire movie. It might be because she sold her soul to the devil, but what the fuck ever.
No, that's incorrect.
Yeah, okay.
That's just like your opinion, man.
Your opinion is you like it. My opinion is we hate it. Let's move on to the next one.
I really like the music.
I hated the music. It was awful.
I like the opening.
It was boring. The movie literally was putting me to sleep.
I like the opening number, Goodbye, Eddie, Goodbye. It's sort of a doo-wop spoof on 50s rock star idoldom. Somebody Super Like You, which is sort of the glam rock Kiss number.
And by the way, if I wanted to watch a movie based off the Phantom of the Opera story that put me to sleep, I would just watch the Claude Rains Phantom of the Opera movie.
Okay, clearly we have differing opinions on this film. I happen to enjoy the film immensely. It's one of my favorites.
You have no appreciation for cinema.
I would say it's the other way around, buddy.
Let's move on to the next one, damn it.
Well, now that we've got our dander up and we're all passionate, go to a different decade. Those three movies we just talked about are kind of connected. Rocky Horror and Phantom came out only a year apart. They have a very similar look to them. And of course, Shock Treatment is connected directly to Rocky. Released in 1986 is a different type of horror musical because it's actually a film adaptation of a musical stage show that was based off of an existing movie. I'm of course talking about Little Shop of Horrors, which is a classic, right?
Right.
Have you ever seen the original Little Shop of Horrors from the 60s?
I started to watch it, couldn't make it through.
Yeah, I've never seen it. Sorry, it's in the public domain. I've got no excuse. I've just never gotten around to it. We've never seen the original movie. In fact, I've never seen the stage play version either. Little Shop of Horrors is actually kind of famous. That image of the Venus flytrap that eats people and also sings pops up in a lot of weird divergent pop culture.
It made an appearance in Jumanji. It didn't sing, but
yeah,
Culture 2 was there.
The giant bud is pretty well known. What's Little Shop of Horrors about, JD?
A giant talking bud.
It's a little more complicated than that.
This guy buys this plant off of somebody for the plant store. They get it in or something. I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen the beginning of the movie. The plant starts to die, and he wants to try and figure out how to bring it back to life. He gives it water, gives it plant food, pricks his finger somehow.
Discovers the plant eats blood.
Basically, it's about a man-eating plant from outer space that ruins this guy's life.
This film actually has some things. I'm a fan of the Paradise. You realize that, JD?
I don't give a shit because this movie rocks and that movie sucks.
They're both Faustian in stories. They're both examples of somebody selling their soul for fame and fortune and it not ending out so well for them, at least originally anyway. Seymour is a real-life nebbish. He doesn't have anything. He lives in poverty. The movie is set in Skid Row, the worst part of New York City ever, where nobody's happy and dreams go to die. I think the implication is that Seymour lives in the basement of the flower shop.
He either lives in the basement or in an apartment above.
He discovers this strange and unusual plant that suddenly makes all his dreams come true at the price of his soul. He has to murder people and feed them to the plant. And like Phantom of the Paradise, this movie also has quite a lot of unrequited love in its story, because of course Seymour is in love with Audrey, the frankly kind of trampy girl who works in the flower shop. She is involved with a series of men that don't treat her right. Seymour doesn't know that Audrey is secretly in love with him as well. And another thing this has in common with a lot of movies we've been talking about is Little Shop also has a Greek chorus type character. In fact, it has 3 of them. The Supreme-style doo-wop girls that are always hanging around the edge of the story and usually end up singing backup in some of the bigger numbers. And they speak to the wider themes of the film.
Or, remember the 8th Hercules?
You know, honestly, you make that connection, and I think you might be onto something there. There are 3 fates, there are 3 girls. You might be onto something there, JD. Audrey 2 is awesome.
Yes.
We haven't really talked about the plant, but the plant is, in a way, kind of the star of the show, and it's got to be one of the best animatronic things ever put to film.
When he does the phone call,
yeah,
at the end, and he's like tapping his...
Tapping, there's so much character. Or after he makes a phone call, he looks in the change slot on the phone. That's a visual gag that cost millions of dollars and countless hours of work.
But it was awesome.
It's great. And that's one of the things that's so impressive about Audrey 2 is it has so much personality. It's a puppet. It's a wire puppet. I can't imagine all the work that had to be done to make this thing come to life. To make it sing, to make it dance, practically. And it has so much personality. It's great. Audrey 2 is awesome. I love Audrey 2. It's one of the best things about a movie that overall was pretty great.
What I think is great is how when they move the head, it almost looks like, even though it doesn't have eyes, you can kind of see like where the eye... Does that make sense?
It has no human face, and yet they put so much expression and personality into something that's basically just a mouth. Just the way the lips move and the head bobs.
You can tell when he's actually glaring.
A massive amount of work put into making Audrey 2 come to life, and it's so successful. The movie wouldn't have worked if they couldn't have pulled it off. But you know what else is awesome about this movie? Steve Martin's cameo as Orin Scavella, DDS. He's maybe in 10 minutes in the whole movie, maybe, and he's one of the most memorable, funniest things about it.
Steve Martin very rarely anymore does anything memorable.
Unfortunately, that's true. The great thing about Steve Martin is this movie, it allows him to play a type of character you don't normally see him play. This sadistic madman who gets high on laughing gas and tortures people. It's just wonderful.
Walks around like to scoop a tank of laughing gas.
Takes this idea of the 50s greaser gang member and takes it to a natural conclusion. That visual itself is kind of amusing. Greaser hair on the leather jacket, but he's also has the white dentist uniform on. It's amusing. I recently bought the Blu-ray of this movie, and a weird theme I picked up on that I'd never noticed before.
What's that?
Parental abandonment. The lack of proper parental figures. Seymour is an orphan. Mr. Mushnick is kind of a father figure to him, but not really a positive one. He doesn't start paying him any attention until he starts bringing money into the store. Audrey clearly has some issues. Clearly lacking in positive role models at some point in her life.
Steve Martin clearly had daddy issues.
Oh, he always mother issues.
Or mother issues.
Yeah.
But Audrey too.
Yeah, Audrey 2 is kind of an extension of this plant that grows up out of this root of parental angst and abandonment. I have no idea if that's intentional, but I feel like that's in there.
Possibly.
John Candy is great as the radio host. Bill Murray has one of the best cameos in film history in this movie. Steve Martin is so crazy and amusing and hilarious in this film. And then here comes Bill Murray as his archenemy, really.
He gets off by getting this dental work done.
The ultimate sadist meets the ultimate masochist. And it's 2 comedic titans going head to head. And as funny as Steve Martin is, Bill Murray is almost as good. He brings that same level to the film.
With the laughing gas or whatever. He's, oh no, I don't need any laughing gas. And we're going root canal. Oh, yes!
Yeah, it's filled like they're doing other things, because he's like in his mouth working with the old rusty drill, and Bill Murray's got his hands on his back like, oh, doctor!
Great stuff.
Or the scene where he puts the cotton in his mouth, and then Bill Murray spits the cotton back up and just rolls off of his face. Little things like that are so hilarious. He kicks him out of the dentist's office, and he realizes that he's stolen part of the dental equipment. We've made a couple references to the original ending of the film, and this is the ending of the stage show, and it feeds into the Faustian themes in the film, and most of the versions of Faust. And he sells his soul, he gets all he wants, and then the taxman comes calling, and he spends eternity being tortured in hell. Seymour, in a way, sells his soul, gets everything he wants, then loses it, and then loses his life. The whole moral is you can't win when you play poker with the devil. The plants take over the world and destroy the world, basically. They eat New York City. On the DVD, finally, after many years, this is restored. For a long time, it existed only as a blurry black and white YouTube clip. And you can finally see the ending in its entirety now. And you see all the wonderful puppet work. It really becomes kind of a 50s giant monster Godzilla movie, almost. Audrey 2 eats the Statue of Liberty, and trains go directly to its mouth. It's pretty awesome, right?
Liked it a lot better than I liked the original ending.
I think they both work. I feel like the original ending is stronger, and obviously it feeds directly into the film's themes. All the model work and destruction is certainly a lot of fun for monster fans. The theatrical ending is maybe a little more satisfying, because it is sort of fun to see the hero come out on top and get the girl and save the day, even if it makes no sense. Seymour suddenly becoming an action hero at the end is kind of out of left field. And even the theatrical ending has a little bit of darkness, because the little Audrey 2 bud is in the front lawn of Seymour and Audrey's dream home that they go to. Now the cast. Rick Moranis was born to play Seymour Kelborn.
Yeah.
And the weird thing is, he's actually a singer in real life. He has like a band, and you hear the name Seymour Kelborn. You see Rick Moranis, and you're like, yeah, that's the guy. Ellen Green as Audrey is wonderful. She has this beautiful singing voice. Even though the character...
She's pretty high-pitched, too.
Yes, yes. Even though the character is exteriorly kind of trampy, inside she's this dreamer, and she's kind of innocent in a way. Touching and wonderful. In a movie that is characterized by comedy and big special effects, it's really the emotional heart of the story.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Big star of the movie is the great Levi Stubbs as the voice of Audrey 2. I can't imagine anybody else singing that part. It's a funny visual. I think that's one of the reasons why it's really caught on in the wider pop culture. It's a plant, but it talks with this big black voice. This is a movie where pretty much everything came together. If the special effects wouldn't have worked, if the cast wouldn't have worked, it wouldn't have worked. But the cast is perfect, and the special effects are incredible, and the film is honestly kind of awesome.
And I will tell you, too, I really like the Somewhere That's Green.
Oh, it's lovely, isn't it? Isn't
Yes.
it a beautiful song? It really is lovely.
That's the dream that if they would have went with the original ending...
It never would have happened.
Never would have happened.
The set design is, we haven't talked about it in this movie, but it's great, especially in that sequence where they're kind of literally living in a magazine cutout of the perfect home. There really isn't any bad songs in this. Lots of times you see a musical and there's usually one or two dead numbers. Not really in Little Shop. Pretty much all the songs are awesome. There was a cartoon show. I don't remember this, but apparently it exists.
You realize we'll be looking this up later, right?
It was on Fox Kids in the early 90s, so it should be in our area. It's set in a high school. Seymour doesn't kill people and feed them to the plant, because that's not really appropriate for kids now, is it? Instead, the plant just eats a lot of food. And apparently they gave him eyeballs. I think they gave Audrey 2 eyeballs.
Where is the Nightmare on Elm Street cartoon?
The one that always got me is, this is a total divergence, but there were a lot of cartoons just based off of R-rated movies. There was a Rambo cartoon, and there was a Swamp Thing cartoon, and a Toxic Avenger cartoon. For a long time, I seem to remember there being an Aliens cartoon. Apparently there was not, but in my brain...
Well, I thought I remembered seeing one, too.
I seem to remember there being an Aliens cartoon.
Has the internet forgot about the Aliens cartoon?
Well, I looked it up, and apparently there was like a presentation, but it was never shown to the public. Because apparently somebody realized a cartoon about rape demons from outer space is not really appropriate for kids, when the toys were everywhere. You know, the toys were huge when we were kids, at least huge for us. I don't know if they were huge for anybody else. Stepping into the modern age, we say that there are a lot of horror musicals out there, but there really aren't. One usually comes along about once a decade, since the 70s anyway.
Yeah.
A big one from the previous decade, a movie that was hoping to tap into a similar Rocky Horror zeitgeist, is, of course, Repo, the Genetic Opera from 2008. I was one of the lucky few who actually saw this movie in the theater, even though it's pretty well known that it got screwed by its distributors and was dumped into 10 theaters in the entire country. I only kind of liked it when I first saw it. It wasn't until I got it on DVD that I started to really like the movie. I showed it to JD not knowing if he would enjoy it or not, because sometimes I show things to JD thinking he'll like them and he hates them. I'm never sure how much our taste lines up from time to time. What were your thoughts on Repo, JD?
I liked it. It was entertaining, I think, is Rocky Horror. Maybe not quite, but it's pretty close. It's got a lot of fun stuff in it, and it's basically a slasher movie that's a musical.
Kind of. It has elements of a slasher film, certainly. It also has elements of kind of torture porn Saw style that was popular in the time when it came out. I mean, it has the same director as several of the Saw sequels. It's not an easy movie to like, though, because the story is just ridiculous, melodramatic, overdone. There's so much going on in this movie. It's a dystopian future. This disease where everybody's organs were melting, and they could genetically create organs, but they pass a bill where if you don't pay the bills on your organs, the repo man will come and cut them out of you and eviscerate you and steal the company's property back. Such a crazy premise. They have to go through a lot of legwork to set it up. And the movie does it in the laziest way, too. It has an opening cartoon narration that sets up the entire premise. And that's just the setup. Each character has their own subplot. There's the father who's being blackmailed by the evil corporation into being their repo man, and he has guilt because he thinks he murdered his wife, and he has a split personality type thing going on, and the daughter wants to go out and see the world because she has this illness that prevents her from leaving the home, and the dad's trying to protect her. There's this operatic thing going on with the evil corporation. The owner's dying, and he has these 3 children that he doesn't trust any of them with the company. They're all vying for control of the corporation from their dying dad, and he is seeking out somebody else. And there's a blind pop star. It's just, there's so fucking much stuff going on in Repo.
Can't her eyes project holograms or something?
Yeah, she has cyborg eyes. That's one of the reasons why the movie gets better on repeated viewings, because when you first see it, you're just absorbing everything that happens. And that's not even talking about extreme visual presentation, which is very stylized.
That must be why I liked the movie so much the first time I watched it, because I didn't pay that much attention to the story. I just like visuals and the music. And Terrence Zadutenich should play Dracula. And I told him that, by the way.
We'll come back to Zadutenich.
Or if he let us call him Zadude.
Can I call you Terrence, or do you prefer Mr. Zadude? The visual presentation is extreme. It's kind of this goth look. Everybody has eyeshadow and wears a lot of dark leather, and characters have long, straggly hair. Everybody's very pale. There's no sunlight in the city ever. The city is always overcast and at night and dark. What the movie is really about is dysfunctional family relation. It's in the blood. Talk a lot about genetic blood in this movie.
Really? Missed that.
Purpose does the whole organ repossession theme fit? Is it just a plot device to set up this wild story where 100 different things are happening at once? Did somebody just say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we made a rock opera about live organ repossession?
Or maybe it was just a plot device to have gore.
Yeah, seriously, just to make a crazy, gory horror movie. Have guts and spines and stuff getting tossed around. Corporate evil is another theme. You know, corporations are evil. And it's a funny film. Is it funny intentionally?
I think so. I think it's more satirical than straight up funny in a way.
I think it speaks a lot to the overall grimdark tone of the film, where the comic relief are 2 characters that are psychopaths. I mean, the comic relief is Bill Moseley, who stabs people repeatedly for fun, and Ogre, who cuts people's faces off and wears them over his own face. There's this whole thing about plastic surgery and getting perfect organs to replace your imperfect natural ones. I feel like the film is trying to say something about a culture that values how a person looks over their actual personality. It's about the blood of family and a society that forces people to undergo plastic surgery. And it's in there. I don't really know if it's handled well. I probably make it sound like I don't like the movie, but I do like the movie because it does grow on you over time. I'm not really into the goth thing. I'm not really into the industrial music thing. Maybe it's because it's so aggressively weird. It goes out on some pretty out there limbs.
Do you feel that the subplot with Blind Meg added anything to the film?
I don't know if it adds anything, but I like the character. It's an interesting character, and I feel like it could have been explored more. She's the only character in the film that actually kind of accepts her fate.
Do you feel that the last act gets muddled at all?
The last act gets very muddled because you have all these crazy divergent storylines coming together, and the movie doesn't hit all of them. Blind Meg is one that's sort of killed off abruptly. You have the whole thing about Nathan and Shiloh is being resolved, and the whole Largo family legacy is being resolved, and characters are dying left and right. There's so much singing, and there's a lot of information getting put out there in song. Gives you a little bit of a headache on the first viewing. Once everybody's dead, and they can actually resolve the plot lines, it worked out pretty well, despite being kind of a mess. But is it really the modern Rocky Horror? Advertised itself as the modern Rocky Horror, and it has this fan base that's very passionate. But is it really the modern Rocky Horror?
I don't think it's as good.
It's not as good.
I feel like Rocky had not so much a stronger cast, but a stronger collaboration between the cast members.
Rocky Horror was lightning in a bottle. You can't really replicate that kind of energy. But it's much more divisive than Rocky Horror. When Rocky Horror first came out and first started gaining popularity, there probably was a large portion that said, this movie is fucking stupid, and I refuse to have anything to do with it. But over time, it's kind of become an institution. And maybe in 20, 30 years, Repo will be the same way. But probably not, because this film's a little more transgressive. But then again, cross-dressing was a really transgressive thing in the 70s. So maybe in 30 years, we'll look at people getting cut open and having their guts ripped out as being quaint.
So Alexa Vega's in this. Do you think it's okay to find her hot now?
Is it okay to find Alexa Vega hot now?
I mean, I don't care. I'm still doing it.
I know when I said to you, that's the little girl from Spy Kids, your reaction was, no!
That was, yeah.
Especially in the second half of the film where she has her Joan Jett makeover. Have you seen her in Shetty where she's in like a studded silver bikini?
I think I missed that
one of the problems I have with the film is I just don't know if Alexa Vega is a strong enough actress to carry as much of the movie as she has to. Her singing voice is pretty limited. She doesn't have a great singing voice.
No, she doesn't.
And this movie requires a lot of singing. When she's delivering some of the big dramatic lines, it feels a little hollow. Anthony Stewart Head is great.
Giles is in this.
He plays the Repo Man and kills people.
And he actually kicks ass at doing it. But he's a good actor. We've been a fan of his for a while.
Well, yeah, since Buffy. And from the Buffy musical, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, we know that he has a pretty great singing voice.
Didn't he play Frankenfurter?
He did, yeah, on stage. He's not new to the horror musical genre. He's been in maybe more of them than anybody else. Unlike Alexa Vega, he can deliver the dramatic weight to some of the silly things he has to do in the film.
Bill Moseley, we met that guy.
We did meet Bill Moseley.
Really nice guy.
He doesn't really sing. He kind of shouts things to music. He's kind of playing Chop Top, really, in a way.
Yeah.
Luigi is very similar to Chop Top. This movie got criticized for casting Paris Hilton, because Paris Hilton not exactly an actor.
To be fair, I kind of liked her in her role in this film?
She's playing herself. She's playing the daughter of a rich family who is addicted to plastic surgery, who wants to be a pop star despite a lack of talent. So it's not like there was a stretch there in her acting ability.
She loses her face.
Maybe Paris Hilton has more of a sense of humor about herself than we thought, but maybe not. Maybe she's just clueless.
I still think I liked her in that role.
She was not distracting. You would think she would be.
She certainly was in that House of Wax movie.
I still have never seen it. I kind of refuse to. They took the Vincent Price classic and made a shitty, trashy slasher movie out of it. And the only reason anybody saw it is because they wanted to see Paris Hilton get killed.
That's the reason I saw it. So how do you feel about Paul Sorvino?
I like Paul Sorvino. He's got an incredible voice. I didn't know this, but apparently he was an opera singer before he became an actor. He's played a lot of mob bosses and criminals in the film, so he's well suited to play the corrupt corporate executive. And of course, Terrence Dutnich, whom we've met.
And I told him to his face you should play Dracula.
Here's another Greek chorus character, because even though the grave robber is involved in the movie, weaves in and out of the story, occasionally shows up to do something, he talks directly to the audience.
Most of his big parts spoken to the audience.
Help explain some of the convoluted rules of this wacky universe.
Which was your favorite song?
I did like several songs. I feel like Night Surgeon, which is the big number where they kick Nathan into the back room and force him to put on the Repo Man outfit and kill somebody, is actually probably my favorite song.
I like 21st Century Cure.
Like Legal Assassin, which is Nathan's big number, kind of sets up his character. I like how that song descends and gets darker as it goes on. And when he's the Repo Man, he's doing this gravelly Tom Waits voice. The scene where he's singing and killing somebody, cuts them open and pulling their guts out, puts his hand up for them and uses them as a puppet.
Talk about the voice changing. Kind of like a Batman that isn't afraid to kill.
Amphitheater Head is the joke. I could see it.
Why can't the Joker be British? He doesn't have a defined origin story.
Always comes back to Batman. A very divisive fan base. Critics eviscerated this movie. That was a pun.
Was it really? Good thing you told me that, because I don't know what a pun is.
Way
Jackass.
more of the music works than it should.
These guys did Devil's Carnival.
That was a seamless segue. Devil's Carnival is interesting because it is a follow-up to Repo. It has a large portion of the same cast and the exact same creative crew. But it's a different film. First off, it's only an hour long. It's a different type of story, and it's a much more focused story than Repo, which has all these crazy, dramatic things happening in it. But it's a lot more simple than Repo. It's attempting to get at some more everyday truths for people. This is sort of an interesting story. It's one of these revisionist religious stories you see in recent history where God is an asshole who does mean things to people and cares not a wink for his creations, nor their suffering. And the film doesn't make the devil the hero. The devil's kind of an asshole, too. But maybe he relates a little more to people than God does. There's a line, Terrence Dutnich, as Lucifer says, "We don't kill children. That's God's business." Why Repo had this crazy horror, goth, industrial look to it. The Devil's Carnival has Victorian steampunk hobo carnival feel to it.
I'm trying to think of a way to compare it, but it's almost, I want to say, like rustic carnival.
The films are similar in that they both have this extreme look to them. The movie was made for very little money, and it's not like Repo was a huge movie either. It was a small budget film, and this movie is even tinier. Why, it's pretty clear the film was probably shot in a warehouse somewhere. It looks good.
It looks really good. The practical effects in it look awesome.
Not cheap. They took what money they had and really made it stretch. One of the things that's interesting about this film is it's basically 3, maybe 4 different stories, because you have 3 main characters who die and go to hell, where they are tested in the afterlife. It's ironic hell, where people are forced to basically relive the same things that happened to them in life onward into eternity, presumably. And it's sort of a metaphor, you know, people can't escape making the same mistakes over and over.
What they're trying to say in this movie is God is an asshole. Basically what they're saying is that in this universe, the devil gives a second chance that God doesn't allow.
He does do that, but at the end they sort of turn that around with the whole epilogue at the end where the devil says to his followers, going to war with heaven now. Now we're going to abuse this loophole to get back at God. The devil isn't really a good person either. He's neither side of the religious equation are particularly nice in this film.
And isn't God like a puppet maker or something?
Yeah, he makes puppets, and if they're imperfect, he discards them, which is a pretty heavy-handed metaphor. One of the things that feeds in this movie is that each one of the characters represents a fable. The dog and its reflection. That informs the one storyline of the woman who was a thief in life and now in hell is still greedy and won't let go of her greed, and that ends up being her undoing. A character is a version of the frog and the scorpion. In fact, the one character is called the Scorpion. I actually had to look up the third fable, Grief and Its Due. I'd never heard of this before this movie. Basically, the moral of that story is don't grieve for too long or worse things will happen to you.
So the cast in this movie is pretty good.
This is only an hour long, and I feel like a feature probably would have been more fleshed out, don't you think? But at the same time, I feel like that compact running time sort of works for it. Prevents it from maybe going off the rails like Repo would have done. They want to make more of them. They haven't yet. Maybe they will. So yeah, the cast.
Terrence Dutnich, we met that guy.
He's back. He's playing the devil. He makes a pretty good devil. He has that deep voice, so that works well. Puts a lot of makeup in this movie, so...
Now, Sorvino, that's God, right?
He's God. Sort of perfect for that part, because he's such a big person. Bill Moseley, Alexa Vega, and Ogre are all back, but they have small roles. Be mistaken for not even realizing Bill Moseley's in the movie. And Mark Center plays the Scorpion. He has this rockabilly 50s greaser look. I'd seen Mark Center in a movie called The Lost. I like Center because he's a little Crispin Glover. That's what he's going for when he acts, when he does his kind of nervous, eccentric bit. He's good in that. He has a pretty good singing voice, not one I would expect. And hey, who knew Sean Patrick Flannery has a good singing voice?
I didn't know that either.
Did you know who Sean Patrick Flannery is?
I recognize the name.
He's the dude from Boondock Saints, the other one.
Oh, see?
I hadn't seen it yet, but I was listening to the songs, and I heard one called Prick! Exclamation point, Goes a Scorpion's Tail, which is full of a lot of sexual imagery, that song. And then I heard another one, In All My Dreams I Drown, which is not actually in the movie, it's in the credits. I said to myself, are all the songs in the movie going to be about fucking? No, is the answer, but if you like Repo, you'll probably dig Devil's Carnival. If you're a fan of Repo, odds are you have already seen this and own the DVD.
You know who's never been in the Devil's Carnival?
Who?
Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
I don't know what Sarah Michelle Gellar is doing. Was that a segue?
Yes, it was.
JD, oh man, oh. Seriously though, before we move on to our next topic, what's up with Sarah Michelle Gellar these days? I mean, I know she had that show Ringer that got canceled immediately.
Because she sucks as an actress.
It's sort of frustrating the way she's washed her hands of the Buffy fandom and wants nothing to do with it these days. This is the thing that made you a star. You should probably be a little nicer about it.
It's the reason she has money.
As JD so subtly suggested. Our next topic, the musical episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer called Once More with Feeling. Now, this comes in the middle of the absolute worst season of Buffy ever. Season 6 is a piece of shit.
I beg to differ.
Oh, would you dislike the veiny, gothy, evil Willow?
I legitimately like 6. I think it's a fun season.
It's fun? It's nothing but a torture gauntlet for our characters to run. And everything everybody does is out of character. I mean, Buffy's sad. She's fucking Spike. This is causing everybody angst. The whole magic as drug addiction storyline for Willow is totally retarded. Xander and Anya are the two characters in the show actually allowed to have a happy relationship, and then it ruins that with a totally retarded sequence.
I just want you to know that, first of all, fuck you.
They're writing Giles out of the show. Dawn is just being an obnoxious teenager who contributes nothing to the plot, except her own problems. Season 6 is bullocks.
I think 7 was the worst season.
No, 7...
I really despise 7.
7 was attempting to fix the things they had done
7
wrong.
was boring.
It wasn't good, but it was better than Season 6, because they were attempting to fix it. That happens a lot on shows. They have a good run, then they have a terrible season, and then they have one more season after that, and they use that season to try and fix the problems from the previous season, even though they're not really succeeding. They try, and the try is appreciated. 7 had its own problems, though.
7 was worse than 6.
No.
Yes.
I disagree.
You always disagree because you have no appreciation for television.
Once More Feeling came in the middle of a pretty downbeat season. I think even you will admit that. A light, upbeat episode in the middle of all this drama and strum and drog. When I went in watching the show, I didn't know if they were going to actually try to explain why it's a musical, why everybody's singing and dancing. But considering it's Josh Whedon, I should have known that he was going to do something meta and admit that, yeah, we know we're in a musical. So obviously there's an explanation. There's an evil dancing demon who is making people sing.
Makes sense in that universe.
Yeah, no, it actually works pretty well. Buffy occasionally does something goofy and campy like that.
Well, while we're on the subject, what was your favorite season?
My favorite season of Buffy? 1 and 3.
I like 5 a lot, but I don't know if it's my favorite.
5 has a weak villain and has a bunch of downbeat bullshit in it, like them killing Joyce, and then it has a weak villain and it has the worst love interest.
I feel like 4 might be my favorite.
Really? 4 is, despite being a weaker season overall, 4 has 2 of the best episodes of the entire run. Hush and Restless. Those are 2 of my favorite episodes in the entire series.
4 because transition from high school to college.
The episode has a really cool opening because it just goes straight into the music, and if you'd gone into this not knowing it was the musical episode, you might be confused. One of the things I like about the opening is that it says, okay, we're going to do a musical and it's going to get a little goofy at times, but you're just going to have to roll with us here. Buffy's in the graveyard slaying monsters and demons, and they're dancing and singing with her. It's funny because the show acknowledges how silly this is at the same time. They're making fun of the thing they're doing, and they're still doing it, which is a very Josh Whedon move. He kind of did the same thing in Cabin in the Woods. Now, one of the big themes of the episode is that the characters' problems come through in song, and that's really kind of what music is all about, isn't it? We can sing things that we wouldn't be able to say.
Which is why this is more of a musical than Phantom of the Paradise.
I disagree with you. I feel like it helped sort of the problems they were having this season to just take the characters' issues and compartmentalize them and say, like, okay, this is this person's problem. Let's wrap that up. Even though they didn't. They went on for another half season. One of the funnier episodes, not just the season, but of the show overall, Anya's number about bunnies. One of the funny things is the musical virus overcomes the entire town, so you have people on the sidelines singing things about, got the mustard out, this woman trying to convince a cop not to give her a parking ticket. Allison Hannigan does not sing. At one point, she even sings the line, I think this line is mostly filler. The evil demon is probably on the lower end of the Buffy villain threshold. People sing and dance, they explode eventually, and this is a big metaphor about how if you constantly let your emotions overwhelm you, you'll burn out. Duh. It's not really a big threat. It's not like the world's gonna end or the town's gonna be swallowed up or anything. He's sort of indirectly killing people. It's on the lower end of the villain threat list, don't you think?
Yes, and ultimately it's Xander that gets rid of the...
Well, it's his whole fault, too, that they showed up in the first place. And
yeah, but he gets rid of him.
And some people died, and Xander kind of gets off the hook for that. He's the one who summoned the demons, and some people died, and nobody says, hey, Xander, that was a fucked up thing you did. That wacky guy, what's he going to do next? The demon, who is this red devil in a zoot suit who swing dances, which is funny. His henchmen have dummy heads. I've always really liked that for some reason. I thought they were really cool.
Yeah, that part of the episode actually kind of creeps me out.
Visually, it's very appealing. It's one of the simpler stories, even though you have all these characters' interpersonal problems. Giles is feeling left out. Feels like he's no longer needed. He's holding a student back. Spike is trying to connect with Buffy. Xander and Anya are having anxiety about their wedding. The first half of the episode, Tara sings about how Willow has her under a spell, and it's romantic and lovely and yay. But in the second half, she finds out that she's literally under Willow's spell. The same song has two different meanings.
I'm sorry, do you like this episode or hate
it? No, I love this episode. It's one of my all-time favorite episodes of Buffy. The basic storyline is kind of simplistic, in a good way. Dawn is kidnapped by a monster, and they have to go in and rescue her.
Why else would Buffy go after the singing demon?
The show does a very successful job of inserting these elements that maybe aren't commonplace on the show into the show without it robbing itself of its personal voice. It's still 100% a Buffy episode, and it's also a musical.
I think that should have been the time that Buffy died.
She explodes at the end?
That way, really, she kicks all this demon ass, but the demon that makes people dance until they explode is the one that kills her?
It would also be the show going out on a high note. And the ending is a little bit of a cop-out, though, because there's this big dramatic confrontation, and then Xander says, sorry, my fault. And the demon's like, well, I can't marry a dude, and they all go away. One of the things that really makes the episode great, all these people you didn't expect to have these wonderful singing voice do. We've already talked about Anthony Stewart Head, but he has like a great voice. When he first started singing, it blew me away. It's like, holy shit, this guy can sing. Yeah! 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 Amber Benson has a big voice. She doesn't have a lot of range, but her voice is very pretty. Some of the cast members maybe are not so good. But what do you think about Sarah Michelle Gellar's singing voice?
I think in the first song, she had a pretty decent, she could carry that tune pretty well. When you get down to Walk Through the Fire.
Or the big number at the end, Give Me Something to Sing About.
Especially that one at the end.
Yeah. Her voice is okay. She doesn't really have a voice strong enough to carry a whole episode.
Yeah, and which is why she did.
Nicholas Brendan. I feel like it's a good thing that Xander and Anya's number is so funny and has so much cute humor in it, because neither of them are really all that strong of singers.
Just, ha enough to be funny.
Yeah, it's pretty amusing. Spike's number is really good. It has this rock edge to it.
Yeah, but
You don't like James Marsters' singing voice.
He did good throughout most of the song, but when he really had to break it down and get those big boisterous moments,
yeah,
I feel like it was a little lack.
Really?
In some spots. The way he sings Peace in that song kind of annoys me.
I like that number. I love Giles' number. So poignant and stirring and sad. The whole sequence is he's singing the song about how he feels like he's standing still. Buffy looks at him and says, did you say something?
I like the 80s montage moment there, though.
Buffy Once More Feeling is actually one of the best episodes of the series. Definitely one of the best episodes of Season 6. We might disagree on the overall quality of the season, but I think we can agree that this is one of the best episodes in it.
Yeah, it is one of the best.
These are the horror musicals we've actually all seen, but I'm going to talk just a little bit about some other notable ones in the genre. Ever heard of Cannibal the Musical? Cannibal the Musical is from the guys who did South Park. It was one of the first things they ever did, and it's about Alfred Packer, who's a real-life historical cannibal. Distributed by Troma.
Okay.
It's pretty funny. But the thing I mostly remember about this are two songs. The first one is kind of a parody of Oh, What a Beautiful Morning from Oklahoma, and it's called It's Gonna Be a Spadoinkle Day. They use this word, spadoinkle, to mean anything. It's an all-purpose word. Obviously, the story is frontiersmen go out into the forest, and they run out of supplies, and they're lost in the snow in the winter, and they turn to cannibalism. And in the middle of this, a character says, hey, let's build a snowman.
So, let's build a snowman. We can make him our best friend. We can name him Bob, or we can name him Beowulf. We can make him tall, or we can make him not so tall. Snowman.
Fuck you, it's funny! Whatever. I would recommend Cannibal the Musical. Sweeney Todd is probably a big one that we haven't talked about. We'll get around to it. I've seen it. I remember enjoying it. I don't remember a lot of specifics. I remember going and not expecting to like it because I thought Johnny Depp in a fright wig dancing around with razor blades was going to be absurd and ridiculous. The movie actually pulled it off. Even though Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter are not really singers, Helena especially.
Really? She's just so multi-talented.
There's a movie called Suck about a vampire rock band. Have you seen it?
No, but I've met Malcolm McDowell.
Yeah, he's in it. He's actually really funny. He plays kind of a sarcastic Van Helsing character. Alice Cooper plays the Angel of Death.
Oh, that's cool.
Moby plays a hard rock, screamo, death metal vocalist.
Moby.
Yeah, little bald, pale, vegan Moby.
Well, if he's vegan, he can throw fireballs.
I remember it being a pretty funny movie and also feeling like an extended music video, but the songs weren't bad. Just last year, we already talked about it on the Phantom Awards episode, but Don't Go in the Woods was a slasher musical that came out that needed more slash and less musical, and the characters were kind of pissy, and the music was kind of hipster, emo, hogwash, so that one was kind of shitty. And before we go, there's this weird trend in stage theater to take horror movies and make them into stage musicals. And I almost feel like the basis of that is, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we did a horror movie and they started singing. They did a Creature from the Black Lagoon musical, which I've actually seen. It wasn't very good.
Go figure.
The Evil Dead, the musical, is actually pretty well liked and pretty well known. I've heard a couple songs. It sounds kind of funny. A Toxic Avenger musical, co-written by one of the guys from Bon Jovi, because they're all from New Jersey.
You don't say.
I don't know if it's any good. There's an opera of The Fly, which is as bizarre as you would expect it to be.
Let's take The Fly and have them sing Italian and really loud.
No, they're singing English, but because it's opera, you can't understand anything they're saying. David Cronenberg and Howard Shore's idea, because they said, hey, our movie The Fly is kind of like an opera already. Howard Shore didn't say that's stupid. Instead, he said, yeah, you're right. He wrote an opera. And I saw clips of it on YouTube. You know, the arm wrestling scene in The Fly? Seth Brundle is arm wrestling and sings opera style, oh no, he's going to break my arm. Really? And then, like, he gets up, turns around, and when he faces the audience, there's the bone sticking out of his hand. I don't know how to feel about this. It's an odd thing. There's a Jaws musical, though it's not an officially licensed Jaws musical, so it's Giant Killer Shark, the musical. I haven't seen it. Supposedly, it's very funny. They're making American Psycho into a stage musical, and the music's going to be done by Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails.
Maybe we'll get an American Psycho musical movie.
The only thing I want to see in the American Psycho musical is I want to see a big cast performance of It's Hip to Be Square by Huey Lewis in the News. It's like the only thing I want from that.
Instead of screaming psychotically after he's chasing him naked with a chainsaw, if he could, like, sing while he's chasing them naked.
If they were actually in the nude and singing, that would be different at the very least. That would be unexpected. Weird that keeps happening. Where's the Nightmare on Elm Street musical? Where's Freddy vs. Jason the musical?
That would make sense.
Where's Freddy vs. Jason the musical where instead of fighting to the death, Jason and Freddy have a sing-off?
But the Nightmare on Elm Street one would make sense.
Really?
Because the nightmare sequences could be the musical parts.
Oh, hey! And they could sing We Are the Dream Warriors.
Why not? No, I was serious about that. I mean, think about it. If there are nightmare sequences where...
I don't know, man. I don't know if I want to see a singing, dancing
But it would
Freddy
be
Krueger.
like the person would be freaking out because they're stuck in this musical world and can't get out of it.
That's pretty much the episode. I was trying to think of like a good way to wrap it up, and I couldn't. The episode's going to end now. I am Mr. Bangers.
And I am Mr. Mash.
You can contact us at Bangers and Mash, BANGERSN, MASH 88 at yahoo.com. We have a Facebook page. Like us if any of you feel compelled to, and we will see you again soon. Sing what you feel.
Feel the heat from your skin and the stubble on your chin. You're no good.
You're no good.
You've got dirt on your hands and everybody understands you're no good.
You're no good.
Oh, what a joke.
What a joke.
You feel like choking. You play for broke.
You play for broke.
He leaves you smoking.
Oh, romance is not a children's game,
but you keep going back. It's driving you insane.
drifting to the treacle deep, slip into a silent depths.
Go to sleep.
With your everything akimbo, float into the Sandman's limbo.
Night, night. It's time for bubbles. It's been a great day. Thanks a heap. Now it's time for everyone to go to sleep. Night, night. It's time for bye-byes. It's been a great day. Thanks a heap. Now it's time for everyone to go to sleep.
Meatloaf
Again! Wah, wah, wah.